Hello, everyone. You're all very welcome to 10 by 9. It's great to have you here.
Hello.
Hello.
Am I upside down?
First story is going to be from Sean Mullin. And I'd like to, Paul's going to unmute Sean, and then we're going to hear a holiday story from the magnificent Sean Mullin.
So, yeah, I don't know if you know this, but fetuses are measured in various sizes, and it's always fruits. You can measure them as grapes, pomegranates, avocados. So long as it's a fruit, it's fine. And at the time where I first wrote this story, around about the time, I suppose, a couple of years ago, Cassie was the size of a papaya fruit. That's what the app was telling us. She was the size of a papaya fruit. So I put that in the story because that's relevant, because papayas are going to feature later on in the story, right? So it was a successful honeymoon then. It was not without its fraught moments, but it was also full of moments of unforgettable beauty, laughter, and happiness. And I kept a diary while I was out there. I was going to read you the story about the idea that a story from the day that we unexpectedly swam with dolphins, because that happened. But then I thought, during the COVID lockdown, probably a wee bit too much. So instead, I'm going to read one which is about urchins, kind of about urchins, which are obviously the opposite of dolphins. They're bastards, basically. But here's what happened anyway. And apologies, I'm reading this off a computer, and the phone's in front of the computer, so I'm looking at two screens, and I don't know really what I'm doing, but I'm scrolling down here. So yeah, so one day we were on something called a blue safari, which sounds like an experience whereby you see in the wild lots of sharks, whales, dolphins, indeed, and other animals roughly equivalent to the size of animals that you might expect to see on a normal green and brown safari on the mainland in Tanzania. But what it turned out to be was actually just a nice trip out on a dhow, out to some islands. We got to do a bit of snorkeling. We had some really nice seafood. And I got burnt to a crisp because I had remembered to put on my factor 50. But in true Irishman factor, I'd done my chest, done my arms, done my legs, done my feet, done everywhere. Didn't do my face. Forgot about my face because I couldn't see my own face. So I got burnt to a crisp. But that's sort of beside the point. At the end of the lovely day, we took the boat back to shore, and our tour guides tried to make us sing on the boat, you know, and there was a crowd of us, and it wasn't really happening. We were just sort of don't really want to sing. So because we weren't singing, I think they sort of dumped us a good wading distance out from the beach and said, right, get out and watch your feet because there's urchins down there, they said. So I immediately almost stood on an urchin, and then my wife got out of the boat and she did stand on an urchin, my wife Emer, and we were a bit annoyed at these tour guides because we didn't say anything because we're Irish and we don't complain. So instead we gingerly made it to the shore, avoiding any more urchins, and got into the taxi. And we had a look in Emer's bag of stuff and took out scissors and brooch pins and nail clippers and all this sort of stuff, trying to extract the spines which were underneath her foot. But the roads in Zanzibar aren't really conducive to such delicate surgery. So I just asked her how she was every so often, and she would say she was grand and she was just a bit sore. And I was thinking that it had been me who had stood on an urchin, I would have been wincing and crying and moaning and making a big deal out of it and cursing urchins and calling them passive aggressive little fuckers, because that's what they are, pardon my language, and such. But Emer was doing none of that. She was very calm and very stoical. And I remember looking at the side of her face and thinking about how much I loved her and how lucky I was to have retained a woman of this ilk. So I'm sorry about that, but that's in here. It's a honeymoon. Anyway, when we got back to the resort, Emer said, look, I want these spines out of my foot now. So we had Wi-Fi, and I Googled how to get rid of urchin spines. And I found on Google that bathing one's foot in warm vinegar was the way to go. So I left Emer and I walked off to the bar to talk to the very friendly barman, Joseph. And Joseph greeted me enthusiastically, like he always did. He always greeted you like he hadn't seen you in 20 years, even though he might have seen you 5 minutes ago. He was, hey, you know, like this. And he said, I see you've got a bit of sun. And I said, yeah, I'll know about it later. And I asked Joseph, I says, have you got any vinegar? And Joseph says, yeah, but if you want to drink something, there are beers. There's food here that goes well with vinegar, but you know, what do you want vinegar for? And I said, no, Joseph, my wife has stood on an urchin, and I want a bowl of vinegar to bathe her foot in. And he said, papaya. I said, what? He said, papaya. He said, you get a papaya, you cut the skin. Between the skin and the flesh, there's a white goo. If you put that on the wound, it'll break the spine down and it'll come out and it'll solve your problem. So there was no word of papaya on Google. So the information served to me as a reminder that sometimes people know stuff that Google doesn't. So I asked Joseph, do you have papaya? And he said, no. And then he said, let's go get one. And there were people in the bar, but Joseph, who was the only person working in the bar, didn't seem to care. Within seconds, we were scuttling down a steep bank and through a barbed wire fence, which was designed to keep people out of the resort, but which we were breaking through to get out of the resort. And we were scuttling through the undergrowth. We were hopping over breeze, rock, block walls into people's gardens looking for a papaya tree. We're going around going, is that one? Yes, just no fruit. Is that one? Yes, but no, we can't get that one. What about that one? That one? We were away for ages looking for a papaya tree. On and on we went until eventually we found a massive papaya tree with a large load of fruit hanging in the canopy. And Joseph was clearly a man who was used to climbing trees with no branches, because he was up and down in about 3 seconds with his hands full of lovely papaya, and my fingers pressing on their tough, silky skin, I've said here. And how long have we been away, Joseph? I said. And he said, long? What do you mean long? What? Because there was a bit of a language thing. Do you need something long? And I mean, no, I mean, how long? What time did we get out here? And he looked at his wrist and what? Let's just go back. So, because time didn't really have any meaning for Joseph. So we went back. I'd say we were away about 40 minutes. And just on the way back, I was holding up a papaya saying, thank you very much, Joseph. And he was like, no problem. Hakuna Matata, he said, which is what they say in Tanzania, not just in the Lion King. So as we walked back, I started thinking about urchins, and this is where I had a little philosophical moment. I started thinking about urchins, and maybe it was the sun, or maybe it was the act of kindness I'd just been the beneficiary of, or the beers I'd had earlier in the day, or the fact that I'd been stung in the toes by something I didn't want to identify. But there in the tropical no man's land outside the resort, shuddery jolt of potent emotions pulsed inside my being, and I had a kind of moment where I started thinking about urchins. I started thinking urchins were everywhere in Zanzibar. Even when we swam with dolphins, really amazing time when we swam with dolphins and snorkeled in the multicolored atoll beyond, there were urchins in each resort we stayed in. The managers warned of urchins, and we took great joy and made crack out of slagging off urchins and asking ourselves what the point of urchins were, and why urchins were so fucking useless, and why urchins were so stubborn, defensive little balls of negativity, and comparing urchins to various politicians and so on. And I realized that actually urchins didn't care. They didn't take it personally. They were not party to our insults or our laughter. They were merely existing. And in existing, apart from being annoying and occasionally painful, they were bringing into sharp and pointed focus the beauty of living and of being in love. So as the resort came into view, I began to catch a grip of myself, and I was transported back 30 odd years in my mind to a beach in Donegal, where I'd walked with my family on the wet sands from which the sea had just retreated, and picking up a domed shell and made of nature's thinnest porcelain, patterned with lines of pinholes and scrupulous design. And I held it up to the sky, and I looked through the big hole at its base and wondered at how the sunlight and how it filled it up, and how my mum, this, by the way, this is a flashback in the story, just in case I didn't make it clear enough at the start, and how my mum and dad explained that it used to be an animal, a spiny, spiky thing that stings when you touch it, but now the animal is gone, and look what it's left behind. Isn't it very beautiful? And we'll take it home. We'll put it on the windowsill. So we got back to the bar. This is back in Tanzania. I shook Joseph's hand, and I went to try to find my wife to sort her food out. And by now there was a long queue at the bar of a rather irate, I would say, group of people who had been waiting for quite a long time to get a drink. And that sums up Zanzibar for me, because the people are absolutely lovely. The location is absolutely lovely. But if you're going to go, be prepared to wait absolutely ages to get a drink. And that is the end of the story. So thank you very much for listening, wherever you are. I'm sorry it was a little bit scatty. Okay, what happens now?
Thanks very much, Sean. It's great to hear your story.